All right. Hello, and if you're watching this, welcome to my new channel. My name is Andy. I'm with Lord of Light Designs and KZ Lighting in southeastern Connecticut. So today what we're going to be talking about is programming and time coding specifically for heavy metal within GrandMA2. This is less of a tutorial and more of a kind of mindset and kind of philosophical approaches, but I will throw some of my own personal tips and tricks in there as well. So to give a little bit of information about myself, since I'm kind of new to doing this video comes at a request from somebody who saw my first video where I time coded the same song we're going to talk about today. It's called Winter by Disembodied Tyrant and Synestia. About me, I have obviously programmed for bands like Disembodied Tyrant, Mental Cruelty, 1056, Famous Last Words, and Cane Hill. I've worked live with Mushroomhead several times, and then on the other side of that, I've also worked with artists like Lil Jon, 50 Cent, Nelly, Machine Gun Kelly, Deadmau5, Kaskade, and Benny Benassi, to name a few. Just to give myself a little bit of background and credibility here, you know, this information could fall on deaf ears, you know, if somebody's like, who's this jerk just like glazing about himself. So why don't we get started and we'll move right into just kind of talking about how I have everything set up for myself personally. Obviously, we are using GrandMA on PC. You will need some sort of hardware to unlock parameters and use something like Capture, like I'm using today. Otherwise, if you just want to kind of work in MA3D, you don't need any hardware hooked up. But in this instance, for something like Capture, you have to have DMX parameters unlocked. Specifically, I'm using streaming ACN, and it won't output streaming ACN through GrandMA2 without hardware. So there's a couple things that you need to go along with it. Obviously, you'll need a visualizer like Capture or MA3D. There's also, you know, what you see is what you get. There's a few other ones, but I prefer Capture. And then you also need something for sending timecode, which I'm using Reaper. Reaper is a great resource, and they pretty much let you use the trial version of it indefinitely, which is kind of awesome in my opinion. And then lastly, what you're going to need is some sort of loopback interface, like I'm using LoopBE. There's tons of tutorials on this kind of thing and setting it up, so I'm really not going to get too much into it here. Literally just go through Christian Jackson's catalog and he's got a bunch of videos explaining all of this. So that being said, that's what I'm using for my setup in particular. Now we can kind of talk about the rig here and what I chose to use just to build this session. Let me pull up my patch real quick so I'm kind of not talking out of my butt here. Anyway, so in this setup, actually I can just go ahead and turn a few things on before I get too deep into this. Let's start here. So for the house rig, I went very, very simple. I have 8 Chauvet Mark II Maverick spots, really for no other reason than they've been kind of a bulletproof fixture that I've used in the past, and I really like the gobos. So there's 8 of those, and then I believe 12, just remembering my groups here. Here we go, and 12 Color Dash, Chauvet Color Dash, I believe H7s, I think. They're on the ground package too. Just another one of those lights that I happen to just like, and I think they look good in the visualizer. So that's really it. I kept it super, super simple for a house package. It was more so just to give the full headliner look to this. So on the floor, we have 16 Elation Darts 360s, and they're on ground supported truss formations that kind of like lean in towards the downstage. And then we also have 16 ADJ hex panels. They're put up vertically in the rear on just very basic pipe and bass. Then to go along with that, we also have, all right, this is a little messy, so I'm going to come back over here where my groups are organized. We also have 8 ADJ Jolt bars. And then lastly, we have some side wash, and those are also color dashes as well. So the only things that I kind of added to this, because the whole reason I did this this stage in particular with this design was because I programmed for Disembodied Tyrant when they were on a support slot for a much bigger tour. We didn't have that big of a rig, and I've kind of always wanted to do a headliner for them, so I, use that to kind of kickstart what I do on this channel, and, hopefully something becomes of it, because I do like talking about this kind of thing. So anyway, now that we're kind of through that, we can talk about what I'm actually doing within my session. So I know I have a whole lot just chilling right here, but my main pages that I'm going to be using here are my layout, and now I designed my 2D layouts to be, kind of a good representation of what I'm seeing on stage. But this is more for me to go through and get, specific selection orders and shit like that. So, I make a bunch of presets, whatever. But most of my build here is right here on page 1. So essentially what we have is we have a master cue list, and this master cue list is going to contain everything that references presets. It's going to contain effects, transitions, pretty much every part of the song that isn't a bump or a strobe or something along those lines. Now the reason being is it is way more organized this way. I can have a whole song that is, this song is not simple by any means, it's a very complex song in my opinion. And everything that I use in the song is contained right here. And there's also, from a engineering standpoint, let's say the guys are out on the road with your show and they have to troubleshoot something isn't lined up correctly. You want to be able to just open up the cue in the song, or open up the cue stack for that specific song and go, okay, I'm going to look at exactly what part it is, and you'll be able to reference it and track things down and troubleshoot much easier. That's not for everybody. If you're just looking to program in 3D, that kind of doesn't matter, but it's still a good habit to keep when you're programming. So this is kind of where I get into like my rules and guidelines kind of rundown here. I always keep everything in this one cue stack. And now I used to do things very different because I come from a live setting where I'm used to kind of going on the fly and punting along with a song. And my time code sessions reflected that, my programming reflected that, because I would just make a bunch of bumps, and I'd have like a single cue stack that had a couple of different looks that it would go between, but it was very chaotic, it was not organized, and I don't think it was my best work when I started doing things this way, as a standardized way, because me and my partner often work within the same MA session for a tour. We want to be able to kind of know where we are at any given moment. So this also brings me into my next session, which I'll get into in a minute. But the one big thing too is to make sure that you always use tracking. I think that's a much better way, because that's what I used to do. Is I used to have non-tracking cues in my cue stack, and it would just bump between them. But I was dealing with a lot of snap transitions in my movements, which is not great for your lights long term if you're constantly doing that. Um, but I think it's a much more efficient way of going from part to part to part to part, because it makes you break them down and break the song down into micro sections, and they each have their own kind of I don't know, kind of beat or separation anyway. So anyway, let's talk about breaking the song down now that we're getting kind of deeper into this. So we're going to bring up Reaper here, and I actually need to be able to read Reaper as well, so we're going to do this. Now, this is for a single song, but even still, this song is very complex. So what I like to do when I start out with a song or a set or whatever is I will listen all the way through without taking any breaks, and then I'll listen back again, stopping at each kind of change in the song or each place where I feel like something should be moving or something should be different. So you can kind of look at, how I have this set up here, like song start. The intro actually kicks in right about here, and then at the beginning of the song there's this kind of guitar lead section, and so I kind of label these not just what part of the song, but I also try to give like a keyword of like what I was thinking when I first heard it, so that when I'm going back and programming I can reference that as well. And this also makes translating what you're doing from music to the lighting session much more cohesive. Things will kind of line up for you, and again, it makes troubleshooting and finding little things later on a lot simpler. And the big thing here too is a lot of times when we're kind of jumping around the song and kind of placing things and figuring out where everything goes, it is very, very helpful to just be able to stop, click, and then be at the part of the song that you want to be working with, right? And I can jump, while playback is going, I can jump pretty much anywhere, and the song will follow. So it's a very, very helpful tool to go through and map everything out before you even start, generating ideas or putting stuff down on your timelines. This is probably the most crucial part of everything before you even get started, and it just like sets the tone for your entire workflow. So that being said, that's one of the biggest things to me, is to make sure that I am mapped out correctly. So now this brings me to, like, I'm going to start getting into the song a little bit, and maybe a little bit of what I actually do for programming and my kind of go-to things. So we're going to take a listen to the beginning of the song. We're going to start at where the actual intro starts to kick in, and where it goes into the next couple of sections. And I'll kind of talk about what I want to get into, and what I want to talk about as far as adding these specific elements into what you program. So let's take a listen. Okay. So what are we looking at here? So what we're looking at is the intro, very slow section where I just wanted to give like a little tease of what the floor package can do. So we got some slow movement, some slow color change, some slow, dimmer fades, and then it kind of kicks into that very leady melodic section there, where we're looking at some actual key lighting. This is what I really like to harp on, because I think it gets overlooked in a way. A lot of us live guys are very used to, metal bands being very particular and saying, hey, don't put the front wash on us at all. We just want to be silhouetted, which, fine, I understand. It's a very specific kind of aesthetic that is, very specific to the metal community and metal music. So I think because of that, we almost let key lighting be a secondary thought, right? But there are a ton of ways to do this effectively that create a lot of drama. And this, in my opinion, is one of them. What I did with this section is I kind of created an A-B feel, because the music is doing kind of an A-B type of thing, right? You hear the melody, and then you hear kind of a blasty section that contrasts that. So this is a good way, and what I did was I took the spots out of the B section, so they're only in the A section. I don't have to move them back and forth as these looks change. So we have kind of an interesting, I love the cone gobo, so we have the cone gobo on it, with one of the spots being just at full open, with nothing in front of the lens. And I think that just adds just such a, such a dramatic change when you go back and forth. So in this essence, I think finding a way to take a specific part of a song that features a specific instrument or musician, and then highlighting that with key lighting. You can do it from the back, you can do it from the sides, which side lighting is great in any metal rig, in my opinion, because I feel like it creates great shadow, which is extremely dark and creates a great visual that goes well with metal. So what we can do now is, I'm going to come back over to MA, and give me a second here, I'm still learning my new setup. Come back over into MA, and I'm just going to turn this Q stack off. Off. There we go. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of walk through a couple of the things that I use outside of just the main Q stack. So what we'll do is, so I have basically what I use as bumps is I'll do what I like to call cascade effects, where I will have the lights move with a delay time, and it'll be like an on cue and an off cue, and have them come in and out with that delay. So if we take a look at, let's see, so these, let's see here we go, something like this, where it chases in a specific pattern all the way through the rig. And if I come back over to MA to kind of show you what's going on here, this is just on a temp that has a built-in delay time, and it's just one cue is on, one cue is off, and at the end it just turns the whole stack off and resets. And something like this can be extremely useful for transitions, but I have it as a kind of a highlight in the very last breakdown of the song. Something like this as well, same exact concept, it's just an in and out fade and on and off cue with delay times built in. And if you're interested in doing something like that, it's very simple. What you can do is, let's just grab a selection, right? You could pick your selection, and we'll use the darts for this. So we'll say we want to do like a snaking chase. I guess this isn't really snaking, but for the sake of argument, this specific selection will come over, find an empty group. We'll call this darts select. Right. We'll take the darts, make sure that we have them, and double tap A to put it at full. And then let's find this place to store this, which we have one open box, so that works perfect. We store that here. Now, I don't know why MA likes to do that. That's a weird glitch, and I'd love it if somebody in the comments happen to know when you actually save a queue and then it triggers a queue stag. I have no idea why. Anyway, so now that we've done the on queue, we should still have them selected, which it does. Just come back here and reselect it. There we go. And we're going to go add 0. We're going to save that, create a second queue. And there we go again. Now, thankfully, I think that's done. So what I'll do is I'll just rename this Darts Chase. Now, there's a couple settings on here that will make it work, and I'll get into that in a moment. But what we'll do first is now we're going to add the delay time. And we're going to come over to delay. I'm going to click, and we're going to write something like 0 through 2. Let's just say. Which all that means is the first light's going to come on immediately, but the last light's going to come on in 2 seconds, and everything will be an even interval in between. So now that we've got the dimmer set, we're going to be clever about this, and we're going to say store store queue. Excuse me. Store queue 1 through 2. Exec 218. I'm sorry. Exec 1.218. And then slash M for merge. Boom. Now we clear. It doesn't look like anything happened because I put that slash in the command line, and usually that brings up a prompt and asking you if you want to override or if you want to merge or whatever. Cool. So now that that's done, we come into here, we hit assign, which is just A. Sorry, Alt A, and then we come into options. And what we do is we select wraparound, and we want to make sure that restart first is enabled, right? We come into the queue stack, we turn this into a follow queue so it starts immediately. And what will happen is if you temp this, press and hold, we have it looks like it did not accept the delay time, so let's just try to store this individually. So we'll go 0 through 2, store Q1. I'll just clear that out to make sure that I have the stuff to do again, 0 through 2, and then we're going to come over and store and merge into Q2. So now let's check that. That's exactly what we were looking for. I'll bring this back up into capture so you can get a better look. But now this chases on in the selection order to the delay time, and then also chases out because the out queue is following it. So that's just how I like to build something like that. There's so many different variations that you could use. and kind of sky's the limit. But I do think that those are really cool as far as bumps and overrides, and you can make them a lot quicker as well. But anyway, we'll get rid of that now since we don't need it. And we'll take a look at a few of the other things that I have going on here. I have kind of some bounces in between groups of the hex panels. Same with the darts. Kind of a group bounce that includes the side wash. I have a fly out with a strobe for the spots. I have a fly out with a strobe for the darts. I've got an in and out sweep, which we saw before. And then a zone bump between the strobe and the main section of the jolts. And this is like a press and hold button that does that same chase style, but it's still programmed almost exactly the same way. This one's another one that includes fade time and with the delay time. We've got some strobes. So big random strobe, and then just a specific section strobe. So like, realistically, I didn't use much to do this song. So kind of moving on here, let's talk about transitions and breakdowns, because they are huge. They're like everything in metal. So let's find a part of this song. Now, I think the ending of this song is quite ridiculous. So we're going to take a look at this, and now what we're going to do, what we're going to be paying attention to is there's the transition section, a kind of breakdown section, another small transition, and then like a big breakdown section. So let's take a listen and kind of like watch a little bit, and I'll kind of break down how I went about doing this and what I think is kind of important. So let's kind of zoom in here. All right, so we'll give it a couple of second lead in, make sure that the time code can catch up. I do believe I thought that was a different spot. Okay, yeah, so let's try this again. Sorry, I messed that up. Edit here. Okay, so we're going to give a little bit of a lead in here and check this out. Okay, so what all were we looking at here? So we have that kind of transition into the very, very deep build. We come into that breakdown, and like, my instinct in a breakdown is always to flash and strobe and kind of match to the chug patterns, but this kind of isn't that type of breakdown. This needs more movement to it, in my opinion. So we utilize that kind of cascade bump effect to go along with it, and we mix in the strobes. We add the chaos because I think that represents this type of breakdown a little bit better. And we kind of move from spot to spot by taking away light groups and then adding them back in when it's appropriate, right? And I think properly transitioning between sections of songs, especially this type of music that's very, very chaotic and kind of goes, you know, in different directions constantly, you know, having an effective transition is going to make or break your light show. You know, it could be the difference between, you know, somebody saying, I didn't even notice the lights, which in most cases is a good thing. Or saying something like, oh, I noticed the lights, they looked like they didn't even go to the music. It looked like it was just overkill, or something along those lines. You know, I'd rather have the I didn't notice than negative feedback, because it means that people were enjoying the show, right? So don't get locked into the whole I have to strobe with fucking breakdown. Like, you don't need that shit. Anyway, I feel like I kind of talked enough about, you know, actual programming stuff. So let's kind of move on to when you're wrapping up, right? When you're getting ready to finish your session, and now you should be going through, and I'll pull up my time code so you can see what mine looks like. You should be going through and time aligning everything, right? You should be looking at the grid. We press stop so we don't do that. You should be looking at the grid and everything contained within your song and saying, okay, is this hitting at the right moment? Right? So you can go through and just time align everything. And this is where looking at your cue points, or key points rather, in Reaper or in your DAW will help you here. Because, oh, I remember this spot, and let me go through and correct this one little thing. Or like, my cue was a little bit late here, let me move it a little bit early. All of that gets so much easier when you know exactly how to find that section, reference it with the music, and pull it up quickly. So you should be going through and making multiple passes, in my opinion. That's what I do, is I'll go through and I'll make a pass and I'll be like, all right, let me clean up all the big things, right? And then I'll go back through and see if there was anything I missed. And I'll go back through again and do the fucking small things, the detail-oriented things, like actually watching the playback inside here and watching for when each different event turns green to make sure that it's in time with the song and the changes the way that they need to be. That's how you make something look really tight. So clean everything up. I think that's a good wrap up. So I'll kind of, let's kind of get into like a wrap up mode. I feel like I've been talking for a good amount of time. So let's just like kind of talk about what this was and how you can apply it, right? So I got asked to do this video to describe my creative process and how I go about programming for heavy metal. And, you know, this may not work for everybody. This may not be helpful for everybody for wherever they're at in programming. But for those that are looking for kind of that bridge between the beginner and the kind of advanced, that real intermediate zone where you start to figure your own style out and kind of maybe divert off the beaten path a little bit, because we all do at some point. You know, this might be a video for you. This might kind of help you from a workflow standpoint or a a mindset standpoint. And it might kind of give you that little bit of, oh, I didn't think about to do things this way or whatever. And granted, I did not share a whole lot of the actual song. If you're interested in watching, it is the first video that I released. I would greatly appreciate it if you dropped a comment on that. Also, if you've enjoyed anything that we've talked about today, I would love it if you would drop a like, subscribe, tell me what you thought. Any kind of good conversation starters, I will try to reply to anything if there's something here you have questions on. But for that, I think that's kind of a bit of a wrap up. And hopefully we'll get some new video ideas here very soon in the future. Thanks for watching.